What's going on, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for 13.1c. This week, it's got a lot of changes because there's actually a pretty big patch, and I explained why they have a C patch instead of a new patch in the patch review, so go check that out if you have not already. But let's go over the summary really quickly. We have Zoe Reroll, that's a new comp. Samira, a lot different though. We're going to use civilians this time. Leblanc, 4 Ace Mech drop down a bit. Lasercorps, Soraka, Kaisa, Recon, and Oxforce Viego. Those are going to be your S tiers this patch. And then in the A tier, we have Misfortune, Draven, Jax, Talon, Star Guardian, Spellslinger, Taliyah, Yuumi, Duelist, MF Mech, Camille Reroll, Threats, Sureshot Reroll, and Wukong Reroll. And then in the B tier, we just have a bunch of other like situational hero augments that we have down there. But let's get on into the S tier right away and just go over how to play all the new comps. So first things first is Zoe Reroll. This one is going to have like Echo as the main tank. It's similar to the other AP boards we've been playing, except you are able to reroll Zoe now because she got a bunch of buffs and she's like pretty big contender for best 3-star reroll right now, or 3-cost reroll, and Heartspat obviously insane on her. And you could do secondary carries too. You could do Soraka, you could do Taliyah, you could do a lot of different things. And yeah, the requirements for this, it's just blue buff on Zoe and then frontline items, and Morello is pretty good. And yeah, like after that, you could keep itemizing her if you're going for 3-star, obviously, or go for other things too. But generally, it's like Gadgettine and then blue buff on Lulu, move it to Zoe later on, and then you could roll a bit on stage 3-2 to find Zoe, LeBlanc, and Annie 2, and then if you don't need to, you could wait till you go 7 and roll on 4-1. All those strategies are perfectly viable. I suggest looking at the AP comps video. We kind of go over some of these. We use Sona more in that example, but you could do the same thing with Zoe. But then the core down here is really just Prankster, Hacker, and Heart, because Heart Emblem, it's just really good on Zoe because it just scales her whole team really quickly. And then like if you don't have the Heart Emblem, you could still play Soraka and stuff. It still buffs up your whole team just a bit slower. Again, main tank's going to be Echo, but it could be Annie early on, or Threats. The board's actually pretty flexible. And then we have a bunch of different augment recommendations down here when you guys want to check that out on my website at bunnymuffins.lol/meta. But let's get into comp number 2, which is Sureshot Civilian. In this build, we have Zac as the main tank, and then we have Samira, of course, and then just like all the other Sureshots, you go 4 Sureshot plus 3 Civilian if you can. Janna's going to be the difficult one to get, but this one runs Galio, Alice, or Zac as a tank line, so it's going to look a little different, and this is going to be what it looks like instead of the Samira mech. It's not the fact that Samira mech is bad, it's just that we're trying to give you guys some other options to go for, and you could play Set over these 3 bozos in the front, you know, like both options work. We just want to show you other things that can do stuff. So we also have one important note. Janna's over here, right? She's buffing Aphelios and Samira. You only want to do this if the buff for Janna is relevant. So if she has a shielding buff, you might want to put her to shield your front line. If she has a damage buff, obviously put her back line. If she has a mana buff, backline as well. And yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Requirements are same as before, Last Whisper, AD. Some people like healing items on Samira, I'm a fan too, but that's really all you need. And then we go again in depth on how to play the comp here. And I believe we go over both versions of the build there. But like again, the core is like 2 or 4 Sureshot, and of course you can play mech as well, but if you're doing the civilian version, definitely like you need the civilians, obviously. Onto the next build, we have the Leblanc Reroll comp, and this is with Threats, so this is really like dependent on admins, obviously. If you have a good admin, people a lot of times ask me like, what is a good admin? So if you're playing for Leblanc carry, like obviously AP is good, mana is good, and also the permanent health one is pretty good too. If you're able to stack your Leblanc starting from stage 2 with health, she becomes really, really strong in the reroll version. So do keep that in mind. It doesn't always have to be the AP or mana stuff. It could be the health one as well. But same AP item holders as we said before, and since this is a 3-cost reroll comp, you want to roll at level 7 mainly. Ideally that'd be at 4-1, just because that's like the highest chance to get 3-cost units to 3-star. And because you're rolling at 7, you could do like Cho'Gath plus Rammus 3-star also. Just, you have to be sure to scout, because if there are a lot of Kaisa players going for your threat units, it could be a little hard to 3-star them, so always look out for that. But you could also hit Sona and Zoe if you want. My one tip for rerolls, if you're going for a lot of units like this build, is only go for 3-cost 3-stars if you have items for them. So if you have like a lot of tank items, like you have maybe 3 tank items for Cho'Gath, 3 for Rammus, and then you have like 2 items for your LeBlanc, definitely try to get LeBlanc 3-star, Cho'Gath, and Rammus 3-star, but then prioritizing less the Sona and Zoe 3-stars, since Sona and Zoe will not have items. Let's move on into the next build for Ace Mech. Nothing's changed here. MF's going to be the main carry. She just works better with the Ace buff than Samira. You obviously can still use Samira, but it's just a little bit worse. But this build's pretty much the same as before, so we'll just skip that because everyone already knows how to play that from the videos last week. Lasercorps Zed, very similar as well. They put a little more power into the Zed, weakened the Lasercorps portion a little bit, but overall this is still like a solid build even after the nerfs. Like 6 Lasercorps, great top 4 potential, and then like 9 Lasercorps obviously still wins out since they didn't really play that. Instead of playing Mordekaiser, since he's a legendary, you could play Ashe until you get Mordekaiser. So there's a couple of different things you could play here before you hit the final board. But yeah, definitely like 6 Lasercorps is just like great stabilization. After that, we have Soraka Carry. So again, AP Comps video. It's coming out now because all these AP comps got buffed a bit, right? And everything else got nerfed. She is more towards the bottom of S tier, but she's still very solid. Echo going to be your main tank. You could use Annie in the meantime in like stage 3 and 4. You really only want to put items on Echo when he's Echo 2 because Annie 2 would be tankier than an Echo 1, for example. Blue buff's going to be the most important item on Soraka, and then after that, like stuff like Giant Slayer or a healing item like Hextech Gunblade will do. It kind of depends on what your augments are. Like you only need one source of healing, and also it depends if you have like other ramp ups. If you ramp up a lot, like I like the Gunblade. If you're just trying to deal a bunch of upfront damage, then obviously just go blue buff, JG, Giant Slayer or something like that. But yeah, you could also secondary carry the LeBlanc, Sona, Zoe, whoever. Even Janna could use like 1 or 2 items, or you could throw leftover items on your tank, such as like double tanking Echo and Annie. So lots of different options here, very flexible build. Kaisa Recon, nothing much has changed here. You pretty much just go for all the 3 cost units, and in this version we have the Nyla. There's also the pure threat version with 4 recon. Both versions are good. It's just really going to depend on what you're hitting that game. So if like you're hitting all the Nylas, like obviously go for the Star Guardian version, but if you're not, then go for the 4 recon and like I think 3 threat version. Onto the next build, we have Oxforce Viego. This comp got like nerfed a tiny bit, but it's still pretty solid because overall like the core comp has not changed at all. Like Viego just does a tiny bit less damage on his resets, and I'll be honest with you guys, he was hitting too hard before, and he was probably even overkilling some stuff. So it's like the nerf didn't really touch that much, I think, but overall it's still gonna be good if you get a spatula. So spatula is really good because you could build either Renegade Spat or Oxforce Spat, which works really well in any version of this comp. So obviously we have the 6 Oxforce up here because that's what you can get units for, but if you ever get like 6 Renegades, really strong, that's definitely the best version of the comp. Now we move on into the A tier MF Anima squad. Not much has changed here. This one is still pretty solid. I'll probably make a video on this later on, like one of those 1 hour or 2 hour compilations. So definitely look out for that. Subscribe below if you are interested in those types of videos. And yeah, it's just like a comp that really stabilizes around like MF1 and then MF2 later on. So like stage 4-1, you could get away with like an MF1 or even no MFs. And then stage 5, you should have the MF2 and she should clean up a lot of different fights. Vayne can be your kind of like soft secondary carry, or you use like a random legendary unit. So another great thing about Anima squad is that you could build the spatula for it to hit 5 or 7, and you could like either stay at 5 with the spatula and then drop Nasus and Sylas, or go to 7 and play Nasus and Sylas to reach that. And then almost anyone can use the Anima spat because it gives every stat in the game, right? Almost every stat, which just means that the item holder is really flexible. Even though it's not optimal, let's say like you put Anima spat on like Fiddlesticks, like he's not going to use the attack damage that well, but like having just the AP and the health is good enough. Echo, he's not going to use the attack damage that well either, but again, like the AP helps a little bit and the health definitely helps a lot. So you pretty much are able to just flex your spatula holder, which makes the comp really strong. Onto the next build, we have Draven Reroll. The Super Draven build is still pretty good, but you really want his hero augment before you play him because it just makes him like infinitely stronger, and you get an extra copy of him because if you don't hit Draven 3 early, you're just gonna bleed out and die. Because let's say you like are rolling for Draven 3 and then you're losing every round because you only have Draven 2, and then you finally hit him but you're at like 20 life. If you just lose 2 fights, which will happen due to like Zephyrs, bad fight, RNG, etc., then you just die and go like 7th or something like that, and that's definitely not good. So only go for this comp if you actually have a lot of copies of Draven. Jax, I think, is actually back on the menu because everything else got nerfed, right? But it's still like not the same as before. It's still strong. I wouldn't play it contested, but uncontested, sure. And if other people are playing other 3-cost rerolls, such as the Zoe comp, maybe the Leblancs, maybe they're playing like Sono reroll, maybe they're doing the Kaisa reroll, Jack should be pretty easy to find. Same with the Riven, because a lot of people will be taking the 3-cost units out of the pool. But yeah, not much has changed here. You just go level 7 for 6 Brawlers, and then if you get an augment, you could go to level 8 for 8 Brawlers. But you could also just drop 2 Brawlers and stay at 6 Brawlers now, because the 8 Brawlers did get nerfed a bit in like 2 patches ago. So onto the next build, we have Talon Reroll. So Talon's still very solid, and other comps got nerfed, right? So it's still pretty good, and you could transition into the other Oxforce build. You don't have to play the version we see here, but if you happen to get like a lot of these guys 3-starred, it's pretty nice. So they're like kind of 2 versions of the Talon comp, but you just want to reroll for level 5 on this as per usual. Vertical Star Guardian, that's what Taliyah carry with all the other Star Guardians to get like a ton of mana for free, so she doesn't even need to build a mana item. Very, very solid build. We also have like the regular Taliyah carry build. Both versions work. It's really just dependent on what you hit that game. Next build up, we have Misfortune Mech. So Misfortune Mech hasn't really changed from before. It's kind of just like, instead of 4 aces, if you don't hit, this is kind of what the board can look like. You could just play a bunch of other random tanks, random legendaries, and that's pretty much all there is to that. You obviously want to try to roll at like level 7 or 8 because you're looking for really expensive units. But yeah, it's pretty much the same mech stuff as we talked about before. The same augments will work on all those, like Second Wind, Ascension, all really good. Celestial Blessing's pretty decent as well. But onto the next build, we have Yummi Reroll. So again, since everything was nerfed, mascots got buffed a little bit. I think Yuumi got buffed a tiny bit as well. It's definitely like still playable, you know, like last patch, it was still playable, even though it was kind of weak. But if you got a good spot for it, you could still do it. But now it's just like the same spot, but even stronger. So definitely go for Yummi Reroll if you get like either a good augment or just like a lot of Yuumis early on. Duelist comps, so Duelists got dropped quite a bit. Like they keep getting hit. I don't know what it is. They just don't like the Duelist build. Like Riot doesn't like it. And yeah, because of that, they do definitely get a lot weaker. I think they want people to rely less on like the trait being good and focus more on like the units being good, which overall I think is fine, because running like a Gangplank late game or running like a Kayle late game feels kind of bad. So I definitely think they should go in that direction. But I think you want to like play 6 Duelists, 8 Duelists in the early to mid game, and then eventually drop down to like 4 to 6 Duelists, even if you have like augments that give you extra Duelists, because you just want to run the better units instead, such as like the random legendaries, because the trait itself definitely did get weaker. So the next A tier comp is the Camille Reroll. This comp dropped down quite a bit. We added an S before, I believe, but it's like the same issue with other 2-cost rerolls like the Draven. Like you either hit or you don't, but the difference between Draven and Camille is that you also need a good admin. So Camille with the Camille augment is obviously very strong, but if you don't have the good admin as well, it still could be difficult to play it. But the way to play this comp, you just want to reroll at level 6 to get Camille 3, and that's really all you're looking for. There are other versions out there. Some people play like Vi and roll for her as well, but in this version we just focus on 3 Renegade and then some of the more expensive units here. Next build up we have is Threats. So the threat build actually is very interesting because both Bel'Veth and Ace got buffed a bunch, so this is definitely a lot more playable. Is it the strongest comp? I don't think so, but it's definitely like a lot better than it was before, because even though we had this in like the A tier before, I never really like purposely went out of my way to go for the Ace or Bel'Veth comp, but I think now you can actually do it because of the buffs. A lot of people are liking Bel'Veth. Just make sure you have a healing item on her, either like a augment such as Thrill the Hunt, Celestial Blessing, or an item like BT or Gunblade. Aesol, you just want to focus on AP. Sometimes you want mana. Lots of different builds work. We have like the full AP build here, but if you go mana, I kind of like having both blue buff and Shojin at the same time. It makes him cast right away, which obviously whenever you have a damage over time is very good, and then like he'll ramp up his second cast after that. It depends if he's like your primary carry or secondary carry, because obviously if he's your primary, you just want to do a build like we have here just to do as much damage as possible instead of focusing on like damage over time. Next build up we have is Sureshot Reroll. That's with Senna. Lots of different versions of Senna Reroll. You don't have to do it like this. You could kind of play it like Samira comps with like the mech or the civilians. So there are kind of two different versions. I just want to let you guys know about that because, like, yeah, Senna works in a lot of different builds, but you could also go for Sivers. So if you go for the more Sivir oriented builds, you definitely want to like get the supers and then like itemize them, max out Galio because he's also a civilian. But if you're focused more on Senna, then you want to go for like more of the Samira type of comps and just replace Samira with Senna 3. But there's not too much to say about this build. It's only if you get the augments. Wukong Reroll, same thing. You want like the Hurricane, or I think it's Cyclone augment, where he just spins in a wider radius, and then kind of play around like this. There are other Wukong Reroll builds. Some people use him as a tank and just like mech him up. Lots of different things you could do there. Like, he's a pretty flexible unit, I'd say, because he's just naturally pretty good. But yeah, since it's 1-cost reroll, you want to roll either at level 4 in a hyper roll or level 5 in a slow roll. Onto the B tier, I'm not really going to talk about the B tiers that much because you really just need the augments for them, and they're all reroll. So if they're a 1-cost unit, such as the ones we just passed by, like Lulu and Kayle, you want to reroll for them at level 4 or 5. If they're like a 2-cost unit, such as I believe we have, yeah, Yasuo reroll, you want to do that at level 6. So yeah, I'll leave the pictures up for you guys here, but if you are playing the comps, just remember like the right levels to slow roll at, because that's obviously going to be the most important thing to do. But that's going to be it for the comps. For the items right now, tank items are like kind of good because people are still playing set, but it's really going to depend on what team comps you like, because like last patch I started an item that a lot of people didn't like, and then it eventually became meta and I was already used to it. So I kind of didn't like that because I wanted to have the item uncontested, but that was just built around the comps I play. So if you play like, let's say Samira, Mech, and Viego, maybe you want like a Negatron cloak because you want to build tank items for set and like an Ionic Spark for Viego. If you want to play for like Zoe Reroll, Kaisa, and Soraka, you might want to start a tier because that builds both blue buff and static shiv for those comps. So it depends what your favorite comps are. Just like list out the main comps you play, and then just think about the most important item for each of them, and then see if they share any items in common. And that probably should be the best way to figure out your best starting item. But that's going to be it for me today for the meta snapshot. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'm on my laptop right now, so maybe the audio is a little scuffed or whatever, but hopefully I'll be back next week. I'm kind of on vacation right now, but hopefully I see you guys again in the next meta snapshot as well.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.